So now let's start digging into Razor templating with Xamarin. So what is ASP.NET Razor? ASP.NET Razor initially shipped with MVC version 3, so it's available in version 3 and later. It's also available in ASP.NET web pages if you use it. It's the CS/HTML files. So, you can take a CS/HTML file and work on it. But basically, ASP.NET Razor it's a view engine. Don't worry if you aren't directly familiar with it. It's very, very easy to learn. I had an interest in it myself when it was first in beta and started looking at it, and it literally just flowed. So many people talk about that. So if you're not familiar with the Razor templating engine, you can pick it up real easy. It's really, really simple. So what's the initial concept? Okay, we're going to have a web view, and we're going to have that in our application, and then we are going to do some processing in ASP.NET Razor locally. So we're going to process in the phone. So we'll process in the iPhone or in Android, and then we are literally going to run the application. So just be aware, though, that you don't want to take an existing CS/HTML file, an existing view file, and run that in your mobile application if that view is set up for a desktop web browser. I mean, if you've got, 50 text boxes set up and a lot of tabbed interface, you're going to have to rethink that. But you can use all your existing knowledge, and I think that's a really, really important point. You'll be able to also call out to native code as necessary within your application. And then once everything's done, you can literally go and exit the application. So that's kind of the high-level concept. Okay, so just digging into this a little bit more. As I said, we're going to use the web view. Here's the interesting piece. Our Razor template, our CS/HTML file, is going to be basically treated as if it's a UI view controller or, an activity, or, it's going to be treated as if it's local executing code. And I think that's really, really important. It's not something that we're going to go load off of a server. We're going to pass data into that Razor template. As I said, very key point, we're going to process that Razor template locally, and then we're going to go and then inject that content into the web view. How do we go about passing data in? Well, we've got a model that we're going to work with, and it's strongly typed. Okay, so we're actually going to get support inside of, say, Xamarin Studio to what that model looks like. Okay, and this is exceedingly easy to work with. I figure if I can figure this stuff out, anybody else can. So that key thing is we're going to hand in the model. We're going to tell the CS/HTML file what's the type that's coming in, and then we can easily work from there. We're also going to be able to add files from the local device into our view. Okay, and on the iPhone, this is really, really simple. We're going to use our resources directory. So when you create a iOS application, you get a resources directory. We're going to use that. We're going to add files into that resources directory that we want to use. Now, one thing I want to be careful of is you need to make sure that you set the build action for the file to be that of a bundle resource. If it's not, you're going to run into some kind of issues. As I was running through some examples and creating them, this was a pain point for me. It may not be by the time you're actually creating your code, but it was just one of those things that I ran into. So just be aware that that build action may not automatically be set for you. I think it was actually because I ended up adding the file into the wrong spot and then had to put it into my resources directory. So, it may actually be working properly at this time. Now we can also add files in Android. It's a little bit different. It's not the exact same setup, but it's pretty close. We're going to use the Android assets directory. So, very similar to our resources directory. Our build action for our content is going to be Android asset. You want to make sure that your files that you bring in have that set. And then also, we're going to use a web view method called load data with base URL. And what that's going to do, that's going to tell our application where to go get our local content from. So here's how to go get CSS files. Here's where to go get graphics files. All right. So how are we going to go and pull data out? Now we're going to walk through this code, but I want to go ahead and mention it. So in iOS, what we're going to do, we're going to literally assign to the should start load member, we're just going to assign a method to it so that when that event occurs inside of the web browser, then we can go through and we can literally go and trap that, look and see, hey, is there some kind of information here that keys, gee, this should be a native call. And once we track that, we can do our processing in there. In Android, it's conceptually, pretty much the same. We're going to create a custom web client class and use that. Inside that class, we're going to override one member. That's that should override URL loading method. And inside that, we'll literally track and we'll say, hey, do we need to come in and handle this natively? So literally what we're going to do in both sides, we're going to have a method that is going to be called when, say, a link is clicked on or touched. And what we'll do is typically, since we're running this code locally, we have complete control of the application. We'll want to most likely use some kind of custom protocol. Okay, and you'll see what this means here in a minute when we look in the code, but it's pretty simple. Now, inside of Android, we can do something that is a little bit special. We can literally call C# directly from our JavaScript. Now, we're really doing this when we pass our data out, but it's a slightly different way of handling this if necessary. We can do this. We can create a custom class. That custom class is going to go and inherit from a Java object, and it's going to implement the Java lang iRunnable interface. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add that class to the JavaScript interface in the web view. And what that does, it basically tells the web view, hey, if there is something that matches this pattern that comes in, then call this method in this class. Okay, and this is also something that's very, very simple to do. In fact, we're going to switch over to it right now so that we can see all these different pieces. All right, so we're going to switch over into Xamarin Studio. First thing I'm going to do is look at Razor templating in iOS, and then the next thing I'm going to do is look at Razor templating in Android. All right, now we switched over into Xamarin Studio, and first off, I'm going to go and run my ASP.NET Razor templating in iOS so that you can see what happens. And I've got my iOS project up, and what this is going to do is obviously start up the simulator, and we're going to go out, we're going to get weather information. I'm going to get that actual information from my native app, and then I'm going to pass that via the model to my ASP.NET Razor template. And then my template is literally going to go through, process that data, and display it to the user. Okay? So let's just see this run first. Here we are, we started up, and boom. Okay? What I've got is I've got the UI web view here. We're actually technically looking at weather information that's coming from New York City, and This is for the rest of today. It's got a high of 51, low of 43, tomorrow 45, 36, and on and on. Okay, oops. And you can see the image here. Okay, now let me show just a little example here of if I want to go get my Las Vegas information. All I did was click on a link, okay, and then I was able to refresh my page. Now what happened is when I clicked on that link, I went back to my native application. I did that same search, this time using Las Vegas, and then I passed that back to my model, or back to my Razor template, and this information was then displayed. Okay, so now let's go take a look at our code. All right, so the first thing I want to show you is that notice I've got a CSHTML file here. Okay, so I've created a Razor template in here. How did I do that? I came in and said add new file, and if you notice, it's not included here as an iOS file. But if I go up and here it is, I can go into my text templating and I can add a Razor template here. Okay, so I could just add, I could just call it whatever I wanted to. Okay, now if I go in and I look at, I've also got a CS file associated with it, and this is basically something that's created for us. We didn't have to go in and create this in any way. And this file is going to be whatever our code is inside of our CSHTML file. Okay, so here's our CSHTML file, and it literally is it's HTML, and we're using that Razor View engine that I mentioned, and doing standard HTML stuff here. Notice that I'm using a custom protocol. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hand back some information, but also notice I'm pulling some data from out over the web. In this case, I'm just pulling some information in from jQuery Mobile's CDN. And here's where I'm doing my processing. Okay, and this is using the standard Razor processing. I've got the @ sign, and then I've got my brackets to signify this is more complicated work. I've got a for loop. You can see I'm working through this. Okay, now another thing to note is I mentioned that this is strongly typed. Okay, so here's my data that's coming in from my model. Okay, maybe wondering where's this coming from. I have something here of type weather report. Okay, type weather report is a custom class that I have created. Where's that coming from? If we go here, it is defined in this class. All right, and if I go and I want to look, this is where the actual pulling back of the data occurs. Okay, so I go out to open weather map and then pull that data back using .NET, standard .NET C# code. Okay, then let's see. Now let's go in and take a look. This is our actual view controller. Okay, so in the view controller, when the controller loads, in my view did load, okay, I'm going to override it and add, well, I'll start with these three commands here. Okay, then this is where some pretty interesting stuff is happening. Okay, I create my template. Okay, and notice that my name of my template matches with my CSHTML file. And also I've got my CS file underneath the covers here. Okay. So I've loaded my template. I've handed my data in. I've handed the model in. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to call generate string. It's going to process the Razor template. And then in my UI web view, which I have created, okay, I am going to call load HTML string. And then finally, this right here I need to hand in this NS bundle, main bundle, bundle URL. What that does, that gives a directory so that I can load local content. Okay? And we'll get back to that local content here in a minute. Now, one thing I've also done, okay, I'm going to handle the should start load method on my UI web view. Okay. Now in here, what is this used for? So when the web browser starts to load, this method is called, and I'm going to check. Okay. And if you remember, inside of the CSHTML, I had a custom protocol, and that custom protocol was location. Okay, so I then go, I'm going to do a split. Okay, that allows me to get the contents before and after. Okay, and I'm going to look at what's after. Then I'm going to call my getData method. My getData method is a local method that I've created. What does it do? Remember, I had to go get some data. This is the method that is going to get data. Okay, now I'm doing this all sync. I want to go ahead, I want to make sure that I've got access to it. I'm going to output the location, and then I'm going to go and I'm going to reload my view. Okay, and then I need to return a true. Okay, so that shows, one, how do I go and load my Razor template into my view? How do I go and communicate back? How do I pass in my data? Okay, now I want to show one thing, and that's loading some content locally. Now I've got a headshot here that I'm going to load in. Okay, and now I'm going to go back to my template. Here it is. And I had commented this out because I didn't want to overcomplicate the examples. But now what should happen? I should get my headshot image in here. Okay, so when I load this guy up, I should now have everything available to us inside of my iOS simulator. Should have everything displayed, and I do. Okay, if you're wondering, the reason why I had to use my own image here is not for ego. It is because I have to have some kind of content that I own. I can't just go and use any kind of content in the training. So that's why I had to use my own image. All right, so now that we've seen this, I'm going to switch over in Xamarin Studio to Android and show the Android example. Alright, now I've switched over in Xamarin Studio and I've got my Android Razor example here. So let's go ahead, let's just see this run. Once again, we'll use Genymotion. Alright, so we've got the same type of data coming back. Okay, and if I go and select my Las Vegas weather, I will eventually get my, there we go, get my Las Vegas weather. So you can see we're getting the same kind of thing. Okay, we're getting our images and we're getting our high-low temperature. All right. So let's go and take a look at this in Android. We're doing pretty much the same kind of thing. Okay. Once again, we've got a layout with a web view inside of it. I have enabled some JavaScript settings. We're going to talk about what those mean here in a minute. One of them should be obvious. We're going to go ahead and enable JavaScript. Okay. I get my code. Then I'm going to go and instantiate my Razor template. Okay. Once again, I'm going to do something very similar. I'm going to use that template. I'm going to process on it, and I'm going to generate my string. Okay, so I'm going to generate my HTML content. Then, remember I said that we needed to have a custom web view if we wanted to process content. So we're going to use the set web view client and have this class here, my web view client, and if we go to the declaration, it's down here. Okay, and this is just a custom client that I created, and as you can tell, I did an override on should override URL loading and did pretty much the exact same thing that I did inside iOS. I tracked the protocol, and if we're using the protocol that indicates this came from the web view, okay, then I basically just repeat the process. All right. Now, so I mentioned also that I can load content locally. Okay. So if I want to go load my content, I've actually got this commented out right now. Okay, this is going to pull that same image, and that image is up here in my assets folder. It's the exact same headshot ping file. So if I go and run this, and this guy will come up inside of Genymotion, and there you can see a picture of the author. All right. Now, just to show where things were a little bit different, as I mentioned before, I have to call load data with base URL. Okay. Basically, what this is going to do, this is the key piece right here. Okay. I've got to hand in some mechanism to tell the web view where am I going to go load my content from. Okay, so this is the mechanism that I use. All right, everything else is pretty much the exact same, and then my headshot loaded up. All right, so that's how I can go and I can hand in files. I could use CSS files, I can use images, I can use pretty much anything. Anything else that I could load could be loaded locally. Okay. Now, I want to uncomment on other piece. I had mentioned that it is possible to call C# code directly from inside your JavaScript. What I'm doing here is I'm going to process the on-click of a button. Okay, and that's just going to display some text. Call C#. Okay, let me comment this out again. All right. Now, if I go back to my main activity, and remember I said that we could actually call C# pretty much directly from JavaScript. This is how we're doing it. I've created in this case it's a private class, JavaScript to C#, and then I have created an instance of that class, and I have told my JavaScript interface, whenever you see something that looks like JavaScript to CS here, then pass it to this instance of this class. Okay. Now, if we go down and we look at our class, notice that we are a Java Lang object, and we're implementing iRunnable. Okay. So in our run method, all we're going to do is just make a toast. Okay, and we're going to display some text. In this case, we're just going to say hello from C#. All right, but we could do pretty much anything. So now, if I have run all this properly and uncommented and commented things back correctly, all right, so I get a button here, and what should happen is when I click the button, I should then get a toast at the bottom, with my text. So hopefully this is all going to work. There we go. Okay, so hello from C#, and there it is. Okay, so you can see that displaying up. And if I actually put a breakpoint here, we actually would stop in here. Okay, so we are really hitting this code.